So, welcome, Benedict, to our conference today. Benedict is going to be speaking on the Wildflower Way, a new guide that they have produced. So, I work quite closely with Benedict. We do a lot of joint webinars and educational events. Benedict is the executive director at the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, and she's been in this position, worked for the organization since 2018. She's been in this position since 2018 and joined the organization in 2015. She provides national leadership on advancing a coordinated, rights-based approach to preventing and responding to elder abuse across Canada. She's known for her strategic vision and collaborative leadership style. She works to build bridges between governments, community organizations, professionals, and older adults to strengthen our collective impact and drive systemic change. Her background spans communications and nonprofit leadership, including previous roles at the British Columbia Law Institute and the Canadian Centre for Elder Law. She's originally from France and now resides in Vancouver, BC. So welcome, Benedict. I will stop my screen share and let you start your presentation. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's always very flattering and very uncomfortable to have my bio read like this. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully it will work right off the bat first time. So you should be seeing it in regular view, and I'm going to move to presenter view now, if it lets me.
Yep, we're all good.
Great. I just want to have my notes in case I get carried away. And you still see it full screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here with me today. I know it's getting to the end of the day for many of you in other parts of the country. I am here to talk, as Rayan said, about a project that we are working on. We're in the last bit of it, the last stretch. It is called the Wildflower Way, and it's about equity-oriented care for women over the age of 55 who experience gender-based violence. It's been a 5-year project funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada. So really briefly, if you are not familiar with the NPEA, we are a national organization, the only one that I know of that is entirely dedicated to the topic of elder abuse and neglect prevention. And we work to improve awareness, support, and capacity so that we can develop a national coordinated approach to elder abuse and neglect. So we work to promote the rights of older people, and we do this through, knowledge mobilization activities, collaboration across sectors and jurisdictions, policy reform, and a whole lot of public education, which if you have attended some of the webinars we do with EAPO. And the vision really is that all of us, currently older people or aging towards becoming an older person, can have access to the services and the supports that we need so we can thrive and so we can live without any violence or neglect. Before going further in, I want to say a huge thank you to the project partners that have been a part of the Wildflower Way since day one, including Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. You can see them on your screen right now. They provided so much expertise and input. They reviewed every word and every paragraph of content that we put out. And, the project would not be what it is without them. So I want to express my thanks to them along with our funder. Now, the work I'm about to talk about and tell you about was developed really in connection to a broader reflection that guides all of CNPA's work. So in 2022, we launched something called Future Us, which is a roadmap, a national engagement strategy for elder abuse prevention, which aims to engage individuals regardless of age, regardless of station in the system, it doesn't matter, whatever they do as individuals, as members of an organization, as representative of services or governments, so that we can all find a way to get involved in the prevention of elder abuse. We all have a role to play. And as part of this strategy, we established 3 broad goals. Number 1 was prioritize elder abuse prevention in every community. Number 2, help support or develop elder abuse networks across the country. They're not evenly distributed right now because they are a critical infrastructure, both for education and awareness, and sometimes intervention and response as well. And three, teach everyone to recognize, respond, and refer in the community so we can provide information and support to people when they need it. So the Wildflower Way really is another piece in that puzzle, in this grand vision, which particularly works towards goal one and goal three. So the why of our project, is that right now there is a status quo when it comes to gender-based violence against older women that is unacceptable. Violence against women is a large issue that is broadly recognized, has been declared an epidemic in many Canadian communities. But where it gets a little dicier is when it comes to talking about violence against older women. It is a real problem. We know elder abuse numbers, 1 in 10 older person in Canada experiences mistreatment every year. That's one thing. But we also know that older women are particularly subjected to gender-based violence. So in 2024, there were 187 femicides in Canada. Now, for these 187 cases, when the age was available and included in the information, we know that 32% of the victims were over the age of 50. We also know that when an older woman is killed by a family member, more than half the time the accused is her own son. It's about 55%, according to the Canadian Femicide Observatory. So that means that older women are really at dual risk, both of intimate partner violence and also family violence, usually often at the hands of their own children. And in spite of these numbers, clearly there are some organizations that are tracking this information. There is a fairly widespread systemic ageism that makes older women and the violence they experience invisible. It is invisible in research often. A wide majority of the major studies on gender-based violence tend to exclude women over the age of 49. So there's a lack of information, of understanding of the specifics of their situations. And their lack of research, makes them less visible and therefore have an impact as well on the services that are or are not available. So for older women who experience or have experienced gender-based violence, the specific services that are clearly for them are either very scarce or sometimes non-existent. And, if we're going to go there and talk about invisibility, even in the National Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence, older women are not clearly identified and fully addressed. There are a few mentions of seniors here and there in the plan, but not really a fully dedicated segment to older women. So this is really why we kind of decided to go into this project, to start digging away at the lack of visibility of older women in situations of gender-based violence. Now, you're going to hear me, the title here talks about the political class of women. It's because we use this term because gender-based violence is about power, not just demographics, right? So women experience lifelong discrimination quite often through wage gap, through the unpaid caregiving that is not recognized, through pension inequities. So they have a structural position in society that exposes them to a systemic disadvantage across their lifespan. That means that, in a situation of violence, that also exposes them to harsher, higher barriers to being able to leave the situation due to that economical and financial imbalance. And that inequality is structural, and that's a form of gender-based violence too. We exist in a patriarchal system that tends to devalue women's labor, women's autonomy, and women's safety. And it doesn't get better as we get older, unfortunately. Now, it is fair to ask yourself, why are we naming women explicitly? It is because of that invisibility in policy and research, because it tends to perpetuate harm. But I want to say that gender is diverse and intersectionality does matter very much. When we're thinking about gender-based violence, we have to think, gender diverse individuals and women who also are racialized or immigrant or living with a disability or living in poverty are facing compounded risks of gender-based violence and compounded barriers to accessing the services they need and the safety they deserve. So, naming women is not meant to be exclude or not to meant to exclude. It really it does not deny diversity. It's really to insist that gender oppression is a core axis of the harm that is happening. We do acknowledge in our work, and we had many conversations while developing the work, that gender diverse individuals are also more exposed to gender-based violence, and that there is a very strong need for specific research and services to understand their experiences. I mean, it just didn't feel right to collapse everyone under the category women. So this is a bit of we expand a little bit on the language as well. If you delve into our guide, you'll see we take a lot of time to talk about the importance of words, including stuff like elder abuse or mistreatment, seniors or older persons. So it's really when we start delving into these issues, language does matter, hence my explanation. So, excuse me. I'm going to skip because I know we don't have a whole lot of time. The Wildflower Way really is, technically speaking, it is a guide and it comes with a suite of tools to help professionals. But it's a framework. It's a narrative change intervention that is meant to challenge the dominant models in human services that often devalue care and render aging invisible. And to be clear, there are enormous amount of people who do a fantastic job. This is not about dismissing the efforts that go from professionals who are in these professions. Um, many organizations, many professionals that are in human services are already working towards equity, but there is a need for additional resources, additional work to help these services really work towards age inclusion and fight ageism in their practice and in the system. So the goal is to recognize that there is structural systemic ageism that is woven into our thinking about aging, into our communities, and therefore in our practices, and to avoid reproducing the systemic violence. It's the narrative change intervention is really about for people to start thinking as professionals differently about what they do, right? Like, I am not a working machine, a cog in a system that feels crushing. I'm a human being. I make choices every day that can make that system work for people. And I'm not alone. I am part of a movement of people who care for the same things. So it's really kind of going from well, here is how we do things. This is how we have the policies and the practices and the business as usual, and moving towards a sort of resistance, care as resistance. And so it's meant to be, Wildflower is supposed to support professionals to help them integrate services for older women who have experienced gender-based violence or who experience it currently into their broader equity efforts. And we do this through, the relational trauma and violence informed practice. That's the core of the Wildflower framework. So rather than rejecting the whole structure, the whole business models, it's more about inviting, transformation from within and growing that equity-oriented care within the cracks of the rigid system. And here comes the wildflower metaphor. I think it's starting to take shape. Um, the change process that we were envisioning when developing the resources was likened to growing wildflowers in that concrete environment. Originally our project was called Stop GBV 55 Plus, which admittedly is not super catchy. But as we were thinking through it and discussing it with our partners, that image of the wildflower took root. Sorry for the pun. It might be slightly intended. Wildflowers are resilient. They find the smallest places to bloom, and over time they transform the landscape. This is what the thought process and what we're trying to do kind of embodies. And older women who have sometimes experienced a lifetime of trauma and violence are similarly resilient, right? They embody that potential for growth and for transformation, even in the harshest conditions. So the wildflower, right? It's a metaphor. It's a very practical guide, step by step, for trying to nurture this growth, for offering a path towards sustainability within our services that are overburdened, we all know this, to foster healing and to lead to generic systemic change in human services. And I want to say, we had to have a slide in there. There's been over time, so many suggested tools and solutions, and it's the implementation of the Wildflower Way is not supposed to be, another version of, yes, you can do more with less. This is not what we're saying, just to be clear. But we have to reckon with the fact that, over time, political climate, economic climate changes. In today, especially, I feel like we cannot necessarily expect to see new magical funding or growth, the creation of new services. It seems fairly unlikely. So it's about working with what we've got, yes, but it's not about just including older women in the existing system as, and saying, well, we're open to everyone. So yes, we're open to older women as well. It's about really truly finding meaningful new ways of co-creating services and co-developing approaches that help intervene earlier, that promote healing, and to find ways to support both the persons who are seeking services and help and those who are providing that service, as it can be very difficult as well. So, going over, as I said, it was a 5-year project. Of course, we started with a scoping review, and then eventually we also led a survey, and we surveyed both women accessing different types of human services, older women, I should say, as well as professionals working in those fields. And what we wanted to know from them was we asked them to tell us about an exceptional experience, an exceptional service delivery that they perceived from their respective sides. What was it that made that experience special and that made it, successful in a way, whatever success might look like? And really, regardless of whether you're talking to professionals or people who were seeking their services, what always came up was some key common ideas, which was about listening, taking time, slowing down, showing respect for a person's story and for her choices, and being present with them, right? So you have a few quotes on the screen. I won't read them all out loud, but the first one from a woman who went to a shelter is she said, they never doubted me, they believed me. They didn't ask, really, are you sure? And that made my time at the shelter wonderful. And from a professional, one of the key things that came up was the importance of the value and the agency of the person that was in front of them, right? It's up to her success, however we measure it, is how she feels. Does she feel safer in the end? Is she able to manage her own life in a way that is acceptable to her, right? It's not always about leaving the relationship. Safety can look differently to different people. It's about listening to the person, listening and understanding the choices that she feels are available to her and supporting her in her decision making along the way. Um, and to go back to, I guess, what was also, discussed by Dylan in her previous presentation, there's a lot to be learned, I think, for all of us from going back to the questions that are linked to the report here, Reclaiming Power in Place, from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. When we started developing the Wildflower Way, we really wanted to root ourselves in this framework because sorry, I'm just skipped ahead, because it really put at the heart of its recommendations to prioritize relationship forming moments because they help understand how Indigenous women and girls and gender diverse people are targeted for violence. It helps understand the causes of the violence and also make changes to end that violence. We are defined by our relationships and our interconnectedness. So this was one of our kind of North Stars while thinking about, putting this project together. And the core of what I'll talk about for a little while here is about, what is equity-oriented care? What does that mean? And it's about, how do we make our best contributions to support older women who experience gender-based violence? And the answer to that is by applying trauma and violence-informed principles. So you'll hear me refer to it often to go faster as TVI. And what it is, by the way, it's an approach that was developed by the Public Health Agency of Canada. it underscores the connection between trauma and violence, right? It policies, practices that recognize the connection between the trauma and the violence and the negative health outcomes or behaviors that it can lead to. So trauma and violence-informed principles really have four pillars. One is about understanding trauma and violence, the impacts they have on individuals' lives, on their behaviors, meaning understanding that it's not just an individual issue, it places itself in a larger picture. Two, it's about trying to develop and create cultural safety. So that means emotionally, physically safe environments for people, meaning you try to address power imbalances even in the smaller details of the environment where the person comes to find you. Three, about fostering opportunities for choice, for collaboration with your client, for true connection. And that requires taking time, being present. And four, providing a strength-based and capacity-building approach to support a person's resilience, coping skills, and, recovery. So it's about seeing the person in front of you and then reflecting back the strength you see and building from that. But really what it is as well is TVI is both a process that requires some inward looking and some outward looking. So as a professional, you have to think about your own experience. Do I recognize how I've been impacted by trauma and violence, either from the work that I do or in my own personal experiences? Does my organization create safety for me to do my work? Do I have opportunities and choice to collaborate, to connect? Am I valued in my experience and knowledge? Because a lot of people in human services, I would say, you'll find women and older women. Do they feel valued in their own identity and experience? So overall, what is the impact of the work that you do on you? And then there's the outward facing, right? The reflection on about your practice. Do I recognize the impacts of trauma and violence on the situations that my clients are in? Do I create safety and protect their individual, what we call choice biographies, right? We all have had different life experiences that changes the scope and the nature of the choices that are available to you to a certain extent. Do I present an array of opportunities for collaboration, for connection with them, for choice that suit them? And can I support the person as the expert in their life? So recognizing their expertise, you have one as well, but negotiating and trying to tamp down the power imbalances that can present themselves when you are being seen as an expert. Now, we are all human. Implicit bias is inevitable. We all carry some form of implicit bias within us, and especially when it comes to age, right? Ageism is very much baked in every aspect of our society. So it makes it really hard to spot within our own thoughts, whether it's about ourselves or about each other. And when you think about women, in addition to the double whammy of ageism and sexism, they may face discrimination based on other things like race, like sexual orientation, ability, religion, immigration status, and all of these intersecting forms of oppression will shape how first of all, their risk of gender-based violence, but also how they experience it and how it's responded to. So there's many ways that power imbalances between service providers and service users can technically further compound harm, especially when that implicit biases go unexamined. So yeah, providing really meaningful equity-oriented responses require some reflection about these biases because it influences decision-making, it influences access to care, it influences the quality of support offered. So on the screen here, and I know it's a bit small, and I apologize for this, but you can see the full-size version on our Wildflower, in our Wildflower materials. We created this one-pager of those implicit biases as they relate to older women, right? We all carry some of these. So, for example, a few of them could be the assumptions of physical frailty, that once you get to a certain age, you are more frail and more delicate. And therefore, that means the impact might be that you're left out of certain activities or thought that you cannot do it. Another big one is asexuality, this idea that old people are just asexual. They have no interest, ability, or right to engage in romantic or sexual relationships. And the impact of that bias could be that we might miss the point entirely and just miss very important conversations about sexual health and sexual violence that they may be experiencing. And that stigma is felt on the other side. They might not bring it up themselves because they feel like they might not be heard. And more generally speaking, I'd say, there's 8 on the page. Another big one, I think, is our general, culturally, our discomfort with the concept of women aging, right? I think we assign women, well, not I think, it's a thing. We assign women a certain value that is attached to youth, that is attached to the ability to be an age to have children, their ability to provide caregiving or to work. And when we go past or outside of the walls of those boxes, suddenly we lose value in the eyes of society and we lose importance and we lose visibility. These things can truly impact how a person is helped, supported, and handled in services. If you don't mind me, my personal pet companion just entered the chat and is making noise. I'm going to close the door very quick. Sorry about this. Didn't want to be distracting with background noise. Okay, so really, the questions when dealing with the or when looking at the Wildflower Way and developing the materials where how do you feel, how supported do you feel in your practice and your well-being? And thinking about your organization, what are or are the organization policies and procedures for your staff? Oh, and here he is. What impact do they have on you, and what impact do they have on your clients? I want to get a little bit more, I could expand on all of the themes. I know we don't have time, but I want to talk about a little bit about cultural safety and cultural humility. Cultural safety, really, it's about recognizing, respecting, and nurturing the unique cultural identities of the persons that you encounter. It's not just about not being racist or being aware that discrimination exists. It's really about recognizing those power imbalances, how they manifest, recognizing the impact of colonization, the discrimination that is institutionalized historically. These things matter. And by addressing them, you're really actively creating a workplace or service that is respectful of people and that is truly welcoming. And similarly, cultural humility, which really works hand in hand with safety, is about going through that individual process of self-exploration, right? And sometimes even self-critique. Um, when you have a client in front of you, you enter a relationship of sorts with another person, and you need to be able to honor their beliefs, their customs, their values, even if they are different from yours. It's really about acknowledging those differences and accepting the person in front of you as they are. And it feels, I think a lot of you will relate. You are, working within a system faced with hu- huge numbers of people who need help, who are all in very difficult situations. And it can feel very much like you're powerless sometimes. And the fact is that we do have power, but we're rarely aware of when we do have power. We're aware of when we don't have it, but we don't realize where we hold it. So the kind of shifting our thinking about power and how we use it with every single encounter does have an effect that is deeper and more impactful than you realize, right? Because you change the relational field, if you will. But you also help contribute to more broadly about reducing institutional harm, because for that moment, for this person, you're changing the approach entirely, right? It's about relational accountability and having that transformative effect on every encounter, which is what reclaiming power in place does talk about as well. So, we exist in a complex system, which is, or as if you think of an organization as a system, which itself is part of a bigger system, which is quite complex. And instead of thinking about an intervention as, how does it fix the problem? This is what we're trying to do. It's about how does it contribute to reshaping that system in more favorable ways as well. It's about um, knowing that by having what feels like a small effect on an individual and then a series of individuals throughout your day, you can actually drive large changes once you aggregate this to, population level. It takes multiple people shifting multiple elements across the many systems that we're a part of to start having a real influence on the whole system. So you are the intervention. It's not really about the program or the policy or the checklist that you need to, go through. It's about you bringing to the table every time you are with someone, listening deeply, respecting a person's pace, like a woman's pace, slowing things down, perhaps, challenging the ageist assumptions that may arise in your thought process without you even realizing it. It's about reshaping the system from the inside, right? So, as I said, the idea of care as transformation, care as a form of resistance against the system, that does not really work for any of us anymore. You are part of an organization, belong to a community within our society. You have to ask yourself, how do I contribute, as a professional, as a leader, as a community member? What is it that's needed? What do I need to be able to make that contribution? So this is what Wildflower is all about. I know it's a lot of words, but I really wanted to kind of get into the meat of it. You can find it all. Our website is up. It is fully bilingual. It's wildflower.cnpea.ca. We'll link to the website in the chat box as well. And there you will find everything about it. So the reasoning for the why, the scoping review that we carried out, the guide, the Wildflower guide that lays it all out in detail, and a set of resources that go with it, which I'm going to introduce briefly. So it's really, this idea in keeping with the metaphor of, okay, let's grow some wildflowers in the harsh environment. So use the guide, the narrative intervention to guide your planning as a professional, as an organization. Then work to integrate those equity-oriented care at practice level and then at organizational level. And then, as I said, it's not a checklist. It's not a thing you do it once and then problem solved. It's really about sustaining it through regular reflection and regular assessment. So if you are a gardener, and you stay with me here on that metaphor, it's about preparing the ground, planting the seeds, tending to the shoots when they start coming up, and then nourishing the soil so it keeps being good and fertile. Oops, sorry. So the cover here you see on the left, the Wildflower Guide, that's the general framework. That's the lengthier piece. But we also have broken things down into several tools. So we have, excuse me, a self-reflection tool to help you individually support the integration of TVI principles into your practice and reflect on where you're at. Then there's an organizational assessment. So this is again a tool for an exercise that is meant to be led as an organization, as a group with all your staff or with a small team of leaders within your organization to help you assess your current state of response, your priority areas, where you're doing pretty well, where things are underway, where you have gaps that you could maybe work on. We also created a little, we call the GBV primer, which is a bit of a knowledge check for professionals on gender-based violence that affects older women. There are lots of, myth and misconceptions out there, and not everyone, depending on which services you are, is necessarily fully knowledgeable. So we wanted to provide a bit of that background information. And we have also some supplemental infographics. So we cover a lot of big topics in Wildflower, and we decided that it will be maybe more digestible to create those one-pagers that expand on some of the concepts we introduce in the guide. So you'll find, one on rebalancing power, one on a sort of case study of an older woman experiencing gender-based violence, kind of working through the steps of what she experiences and what would work best for her. one on substance use stigma, especially when it comes to older women. So these ones are made to be a bit more, kind of one pager, easily accessible that can help support your thinking and your practice. So I wanted to kind of show you a bit more. I'll let you discover at your own pace, but it's really about the self-reflection tool is about, um, improving your practice when you work with older women who experience GBV. It's a very simple kind of questionnaire with multiple choice questions. It is not meant to be judgmental. It is not graded, but it kind of helps you assess where you're at. And it comes with a workaround skill set that hones in on a few key skills and reflection points for you to help you maybe tweak a few things along the way. And that includes, there you can see the list on the screen. There's, courage and advocacy. There's system awareness, strategic navigation. Some of which maybe you already do, but we wanted to have a comprehensive look at it. So organizational assessment, as I said, really focused on putting equity-oriented care at the heart of your policies and your processes so that you can address systemic inequities that impact, health outcome, that impact safety, so that people can receive care that is fair, that is respectful, that is responsive to their specific needs and circumstances. And it involves a reflection in the organizational tool for thinking about about your own organization. Because as I said, in your staff, you likely have many women, many older women perhaps. And it's about asking yourself, are we setting conditions within our organizations that support older women as well? So that means things like reviewing pay equity and benefits. Are you providing flexible options for and accommodations for health-related needs or for caregiving needs? What about succession planning and leadership when it comes to older women? Are you seeking feedback from them about their experiences? All of these things matter. Monitoring these matter. These jobs that you all do are really hard. They can lead to burnout. They can, the workload can be heavy. Older women will shoulder these responsibilities at work, plus often additional responsibilities in their private lives. So you need to take this into consideration when, setting the stage for your own employees so that they can also be in an optimal position to support the clients that they meet. As I mentioned, the GBV primer, I won't spend too much time on it. I wanted to highlight as well because our partners were really instrumental in helping us develop this content. On our website, we really get into the more in depth about the intersectionality piece and how, the experiences of someone based on their different layers of identities can really change their outcomes to or their access to the right services. So we've put a lot of effort in trying to present as much information in as digestible a format as possible. And we again want to thank our partners for their input on this. So really the basic of it, the summary of it is about making your practice led by this person, the person in front of you, and making the exception the rule. Right? So start about the person that's in front of you, not the person in the future, what you think they might be, not based on just statistics or efficiency metrics, but what the person in front of you is telling you. And, making sure that you center them, that you take the time to let them engage with you and build a real relationship with you, which I realize is difficult because all of you are often pressed for time and thinking TikTok in your mind when trying to get through cases, but they're not cases, they're persons, each person individually. So this consistent practice, hopefully, 1+1+1 helps you transform your practice individually, but also transform the structures that we're in so that they're more equitable and we get to a living system that can adapt and that can grow equity. So the idea of care without exception should not be exceptional. And yes, I guess in summary, remember that you are the intervention, you are your actions, your presence, your quality of listening, the choices that you make can completely transform the outcome of an encounter you have with someone. And there's no such thing as neutrality in care, right? There's actions and interactions that might reinforce the status quo, and there are others that help open up cracks and widen them so that equity can take root and healing can take place. So everything from the way someone is greeted to what the environment looks like to how we hold their story to how we make space for them and their stories and their choices, even if they're maybe not the choices that we were thinking of at first as professionals, but the choices that make sense to them make a huge difference in then reshaping not just their individual experience, but the system from within, which is why we call it a form of resistance. So I hope I ignited your interest for this. The resources are all out. You can go check them out whenever you want. If you have questions, there's my information on the screen, along with the information of Margaret McPherson of the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children, who has been the project manager for the Wildflower Way. Um, More importantly, the link for the Wildflower resources is right here in green. And right now we are working to, pilot this with a few organizations. But if you're interested in implemented it with us, let us know and we'll be happy to connect with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Benedict. That was a great overview. And this brings to light the fact that, we do have to shift the way that we change our approaches in addressing gender-based violence from a trauma-informed approaches from both internally as well as our organization perspective. So thank you. I did put the links to many of the documents that you're referring to in the websites, and we'll post those after. So thank you again.